Welcome to the Casey Digital podcast. Today I'm very excited. I've got Dom Carter from the Light Agency, he's the co-founder. And for those who don't know you, have not heard of you yet, Dom, do you want to just give a quick introduction to yourself?
Sure, yeah. So my name's Dom Carter. I'm the co-founder of the Light Agency. We're a brand communications and digital strategy agency based out of Manchester, but we work with companies in Manchester and London, mainly focusing around property, leisure, travel, and e-commerce.
Nice. And we got together, we met recently at an event where we were both speaking on the panel. Thank you for joining us on that one. I thought it was quite a good event, actually, just talking all around like paid social media advertising. And yeah, I think that was where we first kind of connected. But then from there, I was like, oh, it'd be great to get you on the podcast. It'd be great to share your thoughts, because I think there's some really good insights in that, in that event itself. So
yeah, that was a cool event. It's a shame we couldn't do the podcast in that little greenhouse.
Yeah, I've been doing a few in the greenhouse. It is pretty sweet in there. The acoustics aren't the best, but I think the plants and the greenery in the setting kind of outweighs the sound quality. So I'm quite happy with it. But yeah. So just in terms of kind of where did it all kind of start for you and in your career, and kind of just a quick kind of potted history around, how you got into it, and what you're doing. Do you want to just give us a quick overview from the beginning?
Enough. I'm not a marketer by sort of like trade or anything. When I was at university, in my second year, I organised a trip to Amsterdam for like a lot of my friends, for about 50 mates of mine. And I booked the coach to pick us up from my university down in Plymouth and to take us all the way to Amsterdam. I booked the hostel in Amsterdam. And then I had to go around and basically sell this trip to all of my mates to make money.
Nice.
So I could afford to go out drinking and buying and doing all these things you do as a student. So my first ever sort of like introduction into marketing or promotions, I didn't even realize, I think at the time, that it was marketing, was using Facebook to promote this trip that I was organizing to Amsterdam. And I managed to sell it out. It was really cool. I would do sort of little promos on Facebook where I would effectively tell people that I was giving away a free ticket if they had to come, but they had to come and find me somewhere on campus.
Nice.
And we build up like a load of hype around where I might be with this free ticket. And then it was like the first person to come and find me would get a free ticket, and people would be like liking and sharing this promo. And I remember that we did it, the first one, the first sort of drop of the free tickets was in the library. So that way we knew that everybody who would be coming in to try and get the free ticket would be a student, and ended up getting thrown out of the library as a result, and banned for 6 months, because I think 300 people came through to try and get a free ticket to go on this trip to Amsterdam.
I was going to say it. I bet it exploded, mate, because yeah, students' trip to Amsterdam. There you go, free. It's free as well, right? Yeah, all over it.
So when I left university, I went and worked for a company that sort of helped me organise some of these trips. And after I'd been working there for about a year and a half, I was poached by another one of these companies, and they're called Invasion, and they're a company based out of down in Salford.
Right.
And I became their head of marketing. And they're a great business. They've got lots and lots of different brands, I guess, under their umbrella. And they don't just take students to Amsterdam, they take them to places like Thailand and Bali and the US. And that's, I guess, where I really sort of cut my teeth in digital marketing, because a lot of the leads that they developed were all through Facebook and Facebook ads. And whilst I was in, I guess, a very sort of like generalist position as their head of marketing, I very quickly realized that being a generalist isn't fantastic. So I set about teaching myself Facebook advertising and how to do paid social and how to do it really well. So I spend hours on YouTube training myself and making it sort of like an area where I had some expertise. And then when I was at Invasion, I was given the opportunity to sort of branch out and start a new business alongside the guys who owned Invasion, and alongside a guy called Chris Townsend, who is an exceptional sort of videographer. And we created a new company called What Marketing Company. And that was based around developing really engaging creative content, starting with video and then amplifying it through social ads.
Nice.
And that worked really well. And that company's still going really strong. They've got a big team there. They travel all around the world, creating engaging content and amplifying it through social and driving leads for lots of businesses. But I opted to sort of step away from that business and go and work at Cube 3, who are a digital agency based out of the Northern Quarter. And I went in there to basically look after and build out their paid social side of the business, because I think they could recognize that was a growing area within the industry. So I went there and I worked there for 18 months before leaving in April and going alone. And I worked as a freelancer for a couple of months. And I kept working on the same projects with the same person, a woman called Claire. Now, Claire used to be the marketing director at Cube 3. And when we were both at Cube 3, we were really good at working as a team together. She would produce sort of, again, the creative ideation around campaigns for clients. And then I would deliver the media strategy and drive the results digitally. And so when I was freelance, she was freelance at the same time. Again, we sort of started working together again in that collaborative basis. And after a while, it just became sort of common sense to engage as an agency and build a business out of what we were both doing. And it sort of spiraled from there really to where we are now. And we're working with some really great brands like Legal & General, Celebrity Cruises. So we've been really fortunate, I think, to work with some massive companies in such a short space of time of being established.
I think it's good as well if you are going to be setting up on your own. You said it initially went freelance, but then obviously having the opportunity to work with somebody and go, like into a partnership with somebody who you're already used to working with, because I know it's very, it can be quite a lonely place, obviously, starting your own business, especially if you've been used to working within well-established companies. Q3 are obviously well-established agency in Manchester. Going out and doing that, I suppose that must have been a challenging step. But I suppose if you're working with somebody who's quite talented and who balances you out, it sounds like she balances you out quite well in terms of your what you're both good at. So did that take the risk out of it for you, or was it?
I don't think it took the risk out of it. I think it made it easier to acquire clients, because I think if we're talking in the context of purely social ads, you can have a person who's brilliant at doing, paid social or Facebook ads, but what do the ads say? How do they look? Who are they communicating with? These are all things that kind of need to be addressed by a really talented copywriter or creative. And you don't tend to be both of those things. So for myself to have someone like Claire, who was able to look at the way that the brands communicate, and for me to be able to be the person who delivers and executes that digital strategy, it made it much easier, because otherwise it would have been something I'd have had to either outsource, which would have cost money, and you'd have to have trial and error who you're working with. So
being availability and all those things.
Yeah, exactly. So being able to sort of go back and work with someone who I already had an existing relationship with, knew that we worked really well together, it made life a lot easier. And I think as well from her side as well, when she was freelance at that moment as well, she had clients who she was producing lots of content for. But again, organic content and organic reach is being strangled, and there's only so much you can do with it. So for me to be able to step in with those clients and offer solutions about how they can get all of this great content in front of more of their audience and drive a result with it, it paid off. And obviously that made her look great in front of her clients, being able to say, look, now we're producing all this content and we're having hundreds of thousands of people see it who fill your audience. it helped us grow. So it gave us almost like kind of like a running start, I suppose.
Good. Yeah, no, I think it's really good. I think obviously when anybody's looking at, I think there are just some people you click with, when you work with people in your career. I think it's good to go into business with somebody who you do actually click with, where you have complementary skills like that, especially in paid social, because you're right. You know, it's a creative mindset, but then also a mechanical mindset. Not mechanical, but you know what I mean? Like it's a little bit more kind of acquisition strategies and audiences and data and all that kind of stuff. Whereas, creative copywriters or content creators don't necessarily always think like that. So yeah, it's good that you've got a good balance between the two of you. With regards to the kind of early stages, because it's quite a journey really, from studying geology and something completely different
Yeah.
through to where you're at now. When you did start out in your career and you were working on things, is there anything that kind of still sticks with you now in those early days of almost like an early entrepreneurship through social media? Is there anything that still stands with you today?
I think from the beginning, again, like having done like quite a science-based degree, I've always been pretty analytical, and I think what I've learned so much over time, which has always sort of stood out, is being able to fall back on data. And if you can read results and analyze information, then you already have everything you need effectively to be able to find solutions for clients. I think as well, what we do now with all of our clients, which I've never in any agency that I've ever worked in previously has sort of ever been properly employed, is split testing on a big level. And that's not just sort of split testing audiences, but it's also split testing creative. And we're doing it at the moment with one client in particular. We're spending a lot of money on split testing, but that's worth it, because that way we can use data to effectively get behind the rationale behind why we're using certain creative. In some instances, it improves results by more than double, so it pays off. So I think that's something that stuck with me throughout, is sort of like that reliance on data and using that insight.
Yeah,
but being able to sort of combine it with, I guess, the creativity that the brand side provide.
I suppose having that kind of strong understanding of testing hypotheses and looking at data definitely stands you in good stead. And it's amazing the kind of split testing options that you can do now, isn't it? In terms of through Facebook and Instagram advertising, and even to some extent, obviously through Google and YouTube advertising. But I do feel that paid social has been a bit of a step change in split testing, particularly around creatives, in terms of what you can split test, how you can look at how audiences react to content, and where you go from there in terms of making decisions, and the data driving the decision making, I suppose like it does in many other sciences. I always feel like digital is very much like a science. It's a bit, it's something that you need to obviously, like I said, study the data and perfect from there. So, Dom, obviously you've worked in the industry for quite a number of years now, and it's obviously changed a lot over those years. What are the kind of key changes that you've experienced during that time?
So if I look back to, I guess, when I was working at what marketing company about 3 or 4 years ago, we would always identify sort of like the best way to get into new business was by upselling social ads and Facebook ads, because at that point for a lot of businesses, I think it was still relatively new or an unknown quantity. And now, obviously, if fast forward to where we are now, everybody's doing them, which is great, because obviously it shows that people are sort of starting to learn very quickly the value in them. But I think what hasn't changed, or I guess what hasn't changed as much, is sort of the understanding that people have about how to actually best measure them. So I think that's a challenge that we're still facing when we go meet clients, is that they don't accurately measure the power of ads. So I think before, in the past, where people only had maybe one channel of paid activity, which is probably Google, now people are doing cross-channel ads using Facebook and Google. I still don't think that people are seeing them as working in tandem together. I think they still see them as two channels working side by side instead of as part of a whole cross-channel strategy.
Yeah, I agree with that. We did touch on that in the event as well, didn't we? Because it's the attribution model that you're working towards. It's what content you're going to push through there, but you have to, obviously we've already discussed this, but you have to work it the channels in combination, don't you? It's kind of like a team effort, all working towards the same goals.
Definitely. I think like before in the past, when, say someone was spending £5,000 on Google ads, you'd have to almost say, okay, look, trust us, give us £1,000 or £2,000 to spend on your Facebook ads, and we'll start to show you performance there as well. And then after 3 months and you provide them back the results, they'd be like, oh, well, it's cheaper for us to get clicks on Facebook, so let's put all the click money into Facebook. And you have to kind of tell them to take a step back and be like, well, no, it's not. They're not the same thing. They might be doing a very similar job, but the results and the way that they operate are very different platforms. And even now we have some clients who we speak to, and we're running ads for them across LinkedIn, Google, and Facebook. And LinkedIn's great because it shows you great audience. So there's a heavy reliance from there. There's a heavy influence from the client side to be wanting to put all the money into LinkedIn, and it's our job to say, no, look, they're all working in tandem together. They're all doing a very similar job, but it's all part of a big circle of things working together instead of just one by one.
And when you're talking to someone for the first time, and what kind of things are they asking you? Is it, because obviously you're quite heavy on the paid social side of things, and definitely an expert in that field. Is it, do people come to you and ask about return on investment? Did he say, ask you, what is this? How do I make the most out of it? What kind of things do when you talk to someone for the first time and they're kind of discussing campaigns or successful campaigns, what do they normally ask you?
The first question is usually always the same, and you probably get this as well. It's probably, how much do we have to spend?
Yeah.
Always tell them £20,000. No, again, that's always like the first question that people ask is, how much do we have to spend, and what's it going to do? And again, I think it's kind of like the role that we have to almost again take people back a step and educate them and say, well, look, we have to make decisions based off of insight and data, and that's going to pave the way forward. And I think people always have a certain reluctance to want to invest in a new channel. I think if you get a client who comes to you and wants to actively invest or try a new channel, it's brilliant. Do a really good job and forecast as best you can, because I think if people get burned once, it's very hard for them to want to reinvest. And we've just started working with a fashion company down in London who were burned really badly. They were taken for a ride using Facebook ads, and it's taken us a long time to sort of show them that actually they do work and this is the right way about doing things. And now they're all on board, and now they're pumping lots of money into campaigns. But again, their first question was, how much is it going to cost us to get us out of this problem? And how can we get our business showing a return on ad spend again from a paid social side? And it's hard because my honest answer is, well, I don't know. But if we look at the data and if we apply best practice, we run some split tests and campaigns, in about 3 months we'll probably have a good idea of how much you need to be spending on a month to get to where you want to be. But I think people always expect things to happen overnight as well.
Tell me about it.
So again, especially like with e-com, and you do a lot in e-com, and when we're starting with new brands, again, one example with another new brand who we've just helped launch recently, they're great, but we've just launched them brand new, and we're working with another agency down in Gloucester who are really good, but we've had to say to them, look, don't expect huge amounts of sales in your first 3 months. No one's heard of you. And again, the way that I kind of like back this up is when we're delivering the first report is, okay, well, look, we've had something like 10 million impressions and reached 3.5 million people. So that means that people have only really seen your brand through an advert 3 times. It's very rare in such a saturated digital environment that people are going to first remember your brand, and secondly, you're actually going to go and visit your website, and thirdly, going to go and make a purchase off the back of seeing your brand 3 times.
It's kind of like the number of touch points has increased significantly, has it, because of mobile phones? Because you scroll through Instagram, just say you're on your phone, I'm looking through Instagram, you're probably going to see if you're on there for like on your, on your commute or whatever, or you're about to post something and you just scroll through your feed, you're probably going to see about 50 brands, if you're not,
Yeah.
whether it's stories or whether it's through, ads or in stream kind of posts, and you're going to see a large number of content in there, different brands, different things, people trying to sell you things. So to the logic of what you're just saying, well, actually, when you launch the campaign for the first time, someone might just glance, they might just like almost subliminally see your brand or your content, and they might just see that maybe once or twice in a 3 month period. And I think it's Facebook that recommend that most brands or e-commerce brands need 6 or 7 interactions with a consumer before they even think about purchasing and converting into a sale. So I think conveying that to people, especially if they've not done something for the first time, and if they've had the fingers burnt and they're not quite sure that whether this is the right thing to them, it kind of stacks up. And why would you at the end of the
No.
day? I previously spent money, it didn't work, and I didn't trust the people who were doing it. So that trust factor is very important, isn't it? Building a partnership.
Definitely, but then there's a couple of things here as well, and I think a lot of it comes down to also sort of, again, like an education process with the client or yourself if you're running these ads yourself. Like I literally cannot name a single ad that I saw yesterday on Instagram, but I know from looking at my screen time, I was probably on Instagram for like 2 hours yesterday, so I must have seen probably about 1,000 ads. I can't remember any of them. So how do you make your ads more memorable? And we do it with clients again now all the time, again using a lot of the split testing, is we'll do lift studies where we'll serve ads using the awareness objective on Facebook to portions of our audience, and then Facebook will ask the audience whether or not they remember seeing our ads, and they'll ask a portion of the audience who definitely didn't see our ads if they remember seeing our ads. So you'd expect everybody in the control segment to say no, I didn't see any ads, and you expect everybody in your audience who saw your ads to say, yeah, we remember seeing your ads. So you should get like a recall lift rate of 100%.
Yes.
More than likely, you're really lucky if you get anything over 10%. So if you're spending, upwards of $1,000 to reach 3 million people, and you've got a lift rate of 10%, and only less than 30,000 people remember actually seeing your brand, then it's going to be a lot of work to keep delivering ads to that same 30% of people to then hopefully then think that they're actually going to end up converting on your website. So there's a lot of like
that brand recall is something that people often do, maybe not even know about, but I think especially if you're talking about a cross-channel strategy or a multi-channel strategy where you're existing in multiple different channels and you're pushing content out and everything else like that. That recall of the brand is really important, isn't it? So I suppose what you're doing during that list, the kind of analysis on how your awareness ads are running and how the creative is working. You're getting solid feedback on your creative. You're getting an understanding of how memorable the actual brand itself is and the content that brand is creating and resonating with an audience. But also you're giving the client kind of, or as a business owner, you're probably looking at it thinking, well, actually, I just expect that when I spend money out there and push my ads out there, that people see it and people really care about my business. And I think it's actually a good dose of reality to say, well, actually, people are scrolling through so much and day to day, screen time, like you said, it's happening more and more. And it's something that is obviously it's contagious and it's an addiction for some people where they just scroll through Instagram, but they're not actually in an intent to purchase mode. Whereas something like, we discussed in the event previously, something like Google Shopping, I've actually gone in, I've typed in white Converse trainers or whatever it might be. My intent is actually to go and buy some white Converse trainers. But if I see a pair of white Converse trainers in my Instagram feed or my Instagram story, for example, I was actually just on the train scrolling through, you know what I mean? Just killing time in between whatever I'm doing. So it's a different intent and you've got to work the different channels, haven't you? And I think that brand recall bit is something that does get, it's not something that people think about as much, I don't think.
So we the way that we kind of try and approach that is, again, if we're working with like a new brand or a new product for a client, we'll get them to split test the creative to the audience that we want to target, and we'll work out, and we'll pretty much keep improving on the creative until we've got a brand recall of somewhere like 12-15% plus. And
Nice.
only then will we then start investing sort of bigger sums in putting that out to the audience. Because if you think, a difference of 10% when you're reaching millions of people is huge, especially when you're spending big budgets as well. So it's really important for us that creative actually does work and is actually as optimum as it can be. And then only then, after we sort of made a decent proportion of the audience we're trying to target aware, and only then will we actually then start driving them to the landing page. Because otherwise, in my opinion, I think you're wasting money sending traffic adverts to an audience who don't know a brand.
Yeah, and it's obviously creating quite a disproportionate view around the traffic levels and the quality of the traffic that's visiting the site. Because as a business owner or as a client, I might be sat there going, but I've had 10,000 visits. I've had 10,000 link clicks. Why is this not working? And I think that I think it's one of those things that I always say with the guys internally and just in general is that, you've got to educate the client on what you're doing and why you're doing it. In that whole program that you've just laid out and some of the things that we've discussed, if you're managing their expectation is saying, well, look, this is stage 1 of the process and stage 2, we'll move on to this stage 3. And then, it kind of, they kind of understand the story and hopefully people will then invest in it, because I think some of the numbers that you're seeing and some of the numbers that we're seeing, it does definitely get a return on investment. You just need to, not as similar to SEO in terms of the long time scales, but it's the same as PPC in many ways in that, you don't just turn it on and make instant ROAS figures of X. You genuinely have to, invest into the creative, invest into the time. And I think that is the thing that splits the best campaigns from the worst campaigns, isn't it?
Definitely. I think that we live in a world where people have constrained budgets. So, whilst everyone would love to be able to go and dump a load of, advertising spend early on in the campaign to try and get these results, it does take time because you have to run the campaign, you have to optimize it, then you have to learn from it, and then you have to develop new creative and run it again. But what I do think is that people have to be prepared to sort of go top heavy with these campaigns and spend more in the beginning to try and suss out what the creative, the best sort of option for the creative is. And, it does pay off. We've seen it with clients now who've sort of half their web traffic costs, as a result of going through this process. And I know clients we've taken on board, and we've seen that it's costing them a lot of money and they're not getting any recall just because they're not doing any awareness adverts. So how do they know what they're putting out there is working if they haven't tried anything different?
How do you approach it? Because we have discussed it in the past where you look at, almost like the attribution or the, the splitting up of what channels are contributing what. How do you normally approach that? Because that is a common question in paid social, isn't it? It's kind of you need to know what you're talking about to know how to attribute sales correctly.
It's a really difficult question to answer. There's lots of tools out there. And I guess it also depends on kind of what your objective is. If you're e-commerce and you're taking in sales through Magento or Shopify, nothing's going to be a better indication of how well you're performing than, I guess, the revenue figures at the end of each month. But then how do you attribute that back to your channels and where's that coming from? That's a different question. Now, every platform is a walled garden and they like to make it out like they're the best performing ones. But knowing Facebook likes to take credits for last click and last view if it's been less than a day. That doesn't necessarily mean that Facebook had the last click, because paid search could also have contributed to that, or organic. So it's a challenge. I don't think anybody's really been able to nail it because the platforms don't like giving that kind of access to their figures away. I think the best route that I've ever seen sort of combat it is using DoubleClick, creating separate URLs through DoubleClick and then putting those into your Facebook ads. And it gives a really true vision on sort of when did the last click come about. And to be fair, whenever I've seen that before, it's not looked great for Facebook. But yeah, again, it's a challenge, I think.
And because obviously with you guys being almost a I'm not going to say startup because you're not a startup anymore, are you? You're going in, you're trying to grow, and obviously you're growing your client
Yeah.
base and doing really well by all sounds. You know, when you're, because you'll often deal with other agencies, won't you? You'll deal with web dev agencies, in-house teams, maybe organic social, you know, in-house, and then maybe like a PPC or an SEO agency. Like what? How do you have that dialogue? Because I always think that that's a weird thing between agencies. Do you not think it's kind of like, no, we did the sales, no, we did the sales, and it's kind of like, and the client in the middle might think, what? I don't know who to trust. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. It's a funny one, and it's almost, I don't know. It might be because I'm a bit competitive, but I almost feel like kind of like some one-upmanship, and I want to be like as prepared as possible to make sure that we've got all the best data to show what we did is right, or to at least challenge where other people's data might be misleading. But I think sort of like the best way to approach that. And again, we work with an SEO agency and another paid search agency down in Gloucester, and a couple of clients. And again, I think the key is always, before you run any campaign for a client, to agree what it is you're going to measure beforehand, and who's measuring it and how they're measuring it. I think if you try and do that post campaign, it'll be a mess. I think it's always best to prepare that beforehand, and say, well, look, okay, we're going to run this activity. We're going to measure these metrics, and try and perform using these indicators as a metric of how well we're performing, and we'll make these tweaks and changes to the dials along the way. And if you can agree that with anyone who you're partnering with, then that's good as well. And it should almost be complementary.
Yeah, I agree with that approach, because I suppose you just have to be a bit mature and kind of grown up about it, because I think as well you get it sometimes with an in-house team, because you've got maybe like a marketing team or a team that's looking to grow their own knowledge and their own reputation, and they put the hours in from an in-house perspective as well. And there's nothing worse from an in-house perspective when an agency rocks up, at the end of each month, and then says, "Oh, look at this brilliant work that we've done." And sometimes in-house teams feel like the agencies are trying to take all the credit, when in reality they don't necessarily deserve it. So I suppose it's agreeing the rules up front, working in that way, and then tweaking things along, within the parameters of what you agree. I definitely agree with that approach, because it just creates strain and stress where it's not needed. And I think there's enough traffic for everyone to kind of grow, and to kind of spread across the channels. So I'm interested to pick your brains as well about, obviously we're well aware of it, the decline of organic social. What's your take on that, and also the things that you're doing to combat that for businesses when you talk to them?
Yeah. So again, I think anyone who's been running ads on Facebook for a long time has known that this has always been part of their master plan to strangle the reach that organic has. And this goes way back to when Facebook first made it so easy for businesses to promote themselves using social, like back in like 2010, 2011. And they would get businesses on the platform, and then they would use businesses to then advertise Facebook to their audiences and get more people to follow those businesses on Facebook. And that was like one of Facebook's like biggest growth spurts, I think.
It started with pages, didn't it, back in the day?
Yeah.
And then over time it's just evolved, hasn't it, into this machine that it is amazing what you can do, but it's also, ultimately the master plan, isn't it?
Definitely. Do you remember that it was over a decade ago nearly now, when they started off like having like groups and pages as kind of like almost like open public forums, but then people used to create like little meme names to them, and then people would like them, and then you'd end up like liking like 200 pages, and it was like a thing to do. And that's like how like there's so many like random pages that people end up liking that don't exist anymore. Like you question like, I don't remember liking that. But yeah, this has always been part of that plan, is to get businesses, to get people on the platform, and then slowly strangle the amount of organic reach that these businesses are doing, to make them have to pay for it. And it's fine, it's a great business decision. And I think from my side, running the paid media side of the business, it's great because we can identify strategies on that. And also what I tend to think as well, and this is like one of the biggest things about it, I think, is most businesses are looking to grow or to sell products to new customers. If you've already got an existing following on your Instagram account or your Facebook account, well, then they already know about you. So it's not going to be an incremental element of growth. So you're going to have to use a paid strategy anyway to drive that growth. And then again, we've had in the past where people have come to us and they've been like, "Oh, we just want to do organic content and put out to our audience." Like, that's fine, but you're not going to be able to drive sales from that. You need paid to be able to do that. Otherwise, you're just putting things out to the circle who are already aware of you.
Do you do boosted posts?
We don't do boosted posts. That's kind of like throwing money down the drain, I think, because it uses
I hate boosted posts. I think it's such a rip-off. From an advertising perspective, I think it's just a clever little way for them to just make that extra billion or whatever they make a quarter off boosted posts. And people think, oh yeah, I need to just boost the post. Well, actually, no. You need more of a strategic approach in terms of creating your funnel.
There's always, and again, it's always, I think, like small business owners who end up being sort of culpable to it, because there'll be that little like sort of box around a post that's performing 80% better than the rest, and if for £20 you boost it, you can get in front of 14,000 more people. And what's funny is that the automatic like default for when you boost the post is set to engagement. So the metric that people who I guess don't have any sort of external knowledge or sort of expertise level in ads, the metric they'll see is loads of people liking that post that they've promoted. But that's purely because that's what they've asked the platform to do. They've paid Facebook to ask people to engage with the post. And they might do this for like a month or two, and they'll be like, well, I'm not actually seeing any sales or any growth or any results I want to see from doing this activity. And again, this is kind of like where people start to get their fingers burnt from it, because they'll do boosted posts and they won't see anything on it apart from likes and comments, which doesn't...
It's where the conversion objective comes into the advertising side of things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Into the retargeting strategies and some of the other things you can do are quite cool. I just think sometimes I think it's a little bit of knowledge is sometimes a bit scary, in terms of, oh, right, okay, well, we'll just do this because, when someone posts things from an organic perspective, it is right there. It does say, just boost this post. And, like you said, oh, I've got all these likes, I've got all these impressions, that's great. But if you're an e-commerce brand, it's not about likes and impressions, is it? It's definitely about making the money back. So
what is good there, what we do tend to do sometimes, especially like with e-com, where they've got good... a good engagement on their organic profiles, like one ecom brand on Instagram, for example, is we'll use the awareness objective, and then we'll using Business Manager, we'll promote an existing post, and we'll promote like some of the best posts, because, well, if they're resonating well with the audience we currently have, and we create a lookalike audience of that existing audience and promote these posts to them, then it should have the same sort of effect from an awareness perspective, and that tends to work well.
It's a good tactic, because if a singular post is resonating, like I have to meet brands actually. Like we'll talk to clients, or there'll be like a shoe brand, or they'll work sell dresses or menswear or something like that, and we'll talk to them. They'll be like, yeah, that for some reason the post that really worked for us was a picture of a dog eating a donut, or it's like some random. It's rarely actually where they go, oh yeah, it was this particular product shot which was on the model and whatever else. I think it's always something that is just resonating with the audience, which goes back to that whole, testing your content and your creative kind of in the funnel that you're building. But yeah, I think that's quite a good little tip actually, to take a look at what organic posts are working, not using the boost post function, but building it into a static ad. What would you do? Do it as a
yes,
as a carousel, or just an image or a video?
No, so you can't. So Business Manager doesn't let you promote carousels directly from Instagram, unfortunately.
Right. Okay.
So what we would do is we'd maybe strategically plan like 3 or 4 posts that we know that we're going to use in the paid side of things for awareness. They'd get published into the feed either through Facebook or Instagram. And then using Business Manager in guided creation, we'd use the awareness objective, select the audience that we want to target. And then at the ad level is instead of create ad, use existing post, and then we go through and select the best performing ones.
Nice.
And then go through there. And again, it works really well. And what's nice about that is you kind of get like the social credibility of it. So say you've got a client who's got 100K on their Instagram account. You can use that tactic, because if it's a really well planned post, you'll end up getting maybe like 4,000 or 5,000 likes on that post. And then you go and boost it, well, not boost it, but you go and promote it using this method 2 or 3 days after it's been published organically. And then when it goes out to that new audience, it's already got 4,000 or 5,000 likes and several hundred comments on it. So it's got a lot of credibility behind it. The issue that many people have when they're doing awareness ads to try and warm up a new audience is
promoting just for the. I think we've gone quite technical here, which is brilliant. But for awareness ads in my world and your world, I believe, is where we're talking about targeting a new audience for the first time. So this is somebody who's never interacted with the brand or engaged with the brand, and we're introducing the brand for the first time.
Yeah, or a new product to the existing audience. Yeah,
correct.
Yeah. So
sorry, just to confirm.
Yeah. So where were we? So I forgot where I was now. So we promote it to that audience, and the benefit there is because if you're just setting up a standard awareness campaign to a new audience, the problem that you might have is that there's no credibility there, because you're putting all this content out to an audience who no one has ever heard of this brand or this product before. They're not going to like the post. They're not going to comment on it. There's going to be probably very little engagement on it unless there's something that tells them to. So by using this method, you're putting a piece of content that already flies.
Social proof.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it already works with your existing audience, has a lot of engagement on it already. So people can see that there's real people who are very similar to themselves commenting on it and liking it. And it just makes it fly a lot more and increases the relevance score. And obviously, if you've got a higher relevance score, then you're going to get a lower CPM anyway.
With a lot of this, kids, I think this is great content for anybody that does know about Facebook Business Manager. And obviously, it's changing. It is changing significantly, isn't it? I think it's probably been accelerated change in the last 18 months. With regards to how you see the future turning out, and maybe the next 18 months or 12 months, what do you see changing in the future? With regards to paid social.
It's challenging to try and sort of picture what's happening. I think Facebook have just gone through this rebrand. I think they're going to become a lot more tight on the types of adverts that you can run. But at the same time, I think every time they sort of tighten a screw to make it more difficult, I think they're going to there's going to be some way sort of like loosens another one. I think there's lots of different software and platforms out there that are trying to capitalize on automating a lot of the ads. That's one of the things I've seen sort of happening more and more recently, is all the new learning functions that happens within Facebook itself. They've made it really difficult for you to manually optimize things, because they optimize it themselves, with things like dynamic creative, where you can basically upload 5 images, enter 5 headlines, enter 5 bodies of ad text. And before in the past, you kind of have to see which one performs best. Now it just selects it himself. So, I think there's a risk of it becoming, automated to the point where it's kind of like hands off. And, as a marketer, you can just sort of almost be steering the ship and at the helm and letting it sort of like run itself, which is dangerous, because I think, you should always have an idea on what's happening inside the platform. I think it's good to manage optimizations manually, because I think as soon as you start giving away too much control to the platform to let you do it, then the platform's got one objective, and it's to make money.
Of course. Yeah.
So as soon as you start
efficiency of spend and the management of that, knowing when to pull back, knowing when to put your foot on the gas, kind of thing. I think that's the bit where they'll always be like, let's go.
Exactly. The more you relinquish your time to the platform and let the platform run the ads and the optimizations for you, the more it's going to end up telling you that you kind of probably need to spend to improve. Whereas I think, the more meticulous you can be, and the more time that you can spend in the platform itself and understanding what's happening, what's working, and making these tweaks yourself, the more control you're going to have over identifying areas of opportunity for yourself.
Absolutely.
I think it's the same. It used to be that way on Google, is that Google used to give you a series of recommendations, and it was pretty much all just to help Google's bottom line.
And it still is.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. These platforms are there because they need to make money, and you'll get phone calls from your account manager at Facebook or Google, and they've got targets that they need to hit because they need to help you spend more money.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at the same time, they know that you're probably going to only spend more money if you start seeing positive return on ad spend itself as well. And that's the struggle, I think, where does their sort of support sort of turn into their selfish gain?
Absolutely. I mean, that is the ongoing hypocrisy of, things, that this massive kind of tech battle that's going on in the background between, the big three, Amazon, Facebook, and Google. We're just kind of along for the ride, really. And I suppose what we are trying to do, though, is while we can, because it is relatively cheap still, isn't it? Let's be honest. To do the level of targeting and advertising that we actually are able to do, and some of the things that we've described already, it is relatively cheap, in terms of an advertising platform.
Yeah, I think so. But I think also on that, I think, from our position, we're dealing with clients, it's our responsibility to, like I said, so taking it back, okay, if we were Facebook account managers, we would be telling every single client that you need to spend all £10,000 a month on Facebook. If we were Google account managers, we'd be saying you need to spend all £10,000 a month on Google. If we were Amazon account managers, we'd be saying, okay, you need to spend all £10,000 a month on Amazon. It's our role as the third party of the people who the client have hired to say, well, actually, what you need to do, again, going back to the cross-channel strategy, is spend a percentage here, a percentage here, and a percentage here, and they all work in tandem together. For some products, it's not the case. Some products, it might be that you need to put 80% into Google for certain products. And again, it also depends in the stages of the brand as well. When we've launched brands, there's no point in doing a fully built out Google shopping campaign when it's much easier for us to get people to recognize the brand and remember it through Facebook. There's no point in us doing not doing a brand campaign, because if they haven't heard of them on Google, then we need to ensure that brand position is secure.
It's about balance, I suppose, isn't it, in that respect?
Yeah, it's about
trying to make sure that you can get the right balance between each of the different things you do.
Yeah, I'd say it's about balance, and also sort of an understanding the platforms, and also where you want that client, or where that client wants to be 3 months or 6 months down the line.
Cool. Obviously, Don, we've gone quite deep dive into some of that, which I think is brilliant, which is exactly why I wanted to do this with you, because I think that will definitely provide a lot of value to people. If we're taking one step outside of kind of your almost like practitioner and day to day, do you have any kind of routines or rituals or anything like that, things that you go through on a regular basis to keep you kind of sharp, or to kind of help you in this kind of balance of what you're working on?
I go to CrossFit maybe like 3 or 4 times a week, which is great. But again, running like a business, I used to be much more proficient at it when I had a 9-to-5 job, because it's easy to build a routine. But running a business, like, I don't know if I'm in London or if I'm not in London, so it's harder to have like a routine in that respect, I think. But I kind of like that as well. I like not having routines, but yeah, the only thing that I have at the moment that I'll try and do if I'm in Manchester and I'm at home is visit the gym 7 a.m, and that's it. Which is quite sad, actually, isn't
Outside of that, it's just the grind.
yeah. Well, to be fair, I nearly bought an electronic keyboard last night to try and teach myself to play piano.
All right.
Because I don't know, I feel like every time I go down to London, like, like when you go down on the train to like St Pancras or Euston, and there's always like pianos in the train stations. I really want to be able to just go and sit down and do that. So that's really like going to be my challenge over like the Christmas holidays, is to teach myself to do that.
Nice. Well, there's loads of YouTube videos. I learned how to play guitar badly through YouTube videos. So yeah, I suppose it's a good like a creative release as well, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I haven't, like, because I taught myself to play guitar when I was 14, and then I moved to England when I was like 16, and I never played it again.
Right. Okay.
So yeah.
With regards to, I don't know if you read a lot of books or anything. Are there any books that you've read, or any pieces of content or anything that you share out with people, and that you say, here's a great book, have a read kind of thing, or here's a great video, or a blog or a piece of content that you share with people?
I probably don't share enough content with people as I probably should. But in terms of books, I read a really good book recently called Factfulness by a guy called Hans Rosling. And it's brilliant because it literally explains how the world isn't as bad as we think it is. And it's basically debunking all of these myths that the world is going into a worse and worse state. So, for instance, like it talks about how poverty has declined by half in the last 20 years, how more children go to school now more than ever, how more people have access to drinking water than ever before. And basically saying like how like in an era where media is so prevalent and tragedies sell headlines, the earth has never been in, or the earth or the planet or the people have never been in a better place than what we are now. It's actually quite refreshing. It's quite nice as well because like I'm sitting in meetings sometimes with people and they're talking about how terrible the world is, and then I'm backed up by all these facts from this book. It's good. It only came out like a few months ago as well.
Nice. I think that's a good recommendation. I think that's good for anybody, just especially with all, like you said, just the crap that's in the news and through the media and things getting pushed through social media. I did watch that Great Hack, on Netflix, and that really opened my eyes up. Have you seen that?
I think I started to watch it, and then I'm terrible with series. I just can't keep up. Like I'll never watch series. I'll probably watch like one episode and then just won't bother watching anything else.
Yeah, it was just short. It basically covers the whole Cambridge Analytica thing behind the scenes around the people who were involved in the Cambridge Analytica scandal and all the things that happened behind it. Yeah, and I think that kind of thing is using almost the powers that we were talking about earlier for bad. In terms of trying to rig elections and change political landscapes. I think it can be quite powerful. Some of the things some of the tools that we use in our industry, and I think that is definitely starting to, change that balance. But I think books like that one that you just said is actually, if they are based on facts, you can't argue against that.
No, exactly, and I think that's the case it's kind of making, is that people will bang a drum really loudly about certain points to try and incite fear in people, or incite change somewhere. And really, actually, the world's never been in a better place. It's just it doesn't sell headlines saying how many planes successfully landed every day.
Yeah. Just in the industry, because obviously it sounds like we've both worked in the industry for long enough to know a few people. Is there any people who've influenced your career, or people you look up to in our industry, just in general in the kind of digital space?
It's a hard question. I think there's people who I've met who are sort of like, I wouldn't say necessarily influenced me, but sort of like made me think more profoundly about certain elements of it. I try not so much, I think, to maybe pay too much attention, because I think then you maybe lose a bit of, I guess, innovation in what you're doing yourself. And I've tried to do that like quite a bit. Like recently, is not pay too much attention to what other people are doing and focus more on myself, especially with the new business starting up. Because that way it helps us be a bit more unique in that way, I guess.
Where do you go for your kind of tips and advice and things? Just around more like practitioner stuff and like content and stuff like that. Do you actually go and read out anything around like Facebook ads or Blueprint or anything like that? Is there anything that you look at there, or do you just do it all yourself?
So I think Blueprint's great, but again, it's kind of like the Facebook school of marketing, isn't it? So it's teaching yourself how they want you to run ads on the platform, which again is fine to a point, but I think you also need to be able to have a bit of experience outside of that, because that's where you learn like the tricks and stuff. So I spend time on YouTube. I listen to a couple of podcasts as well that kind of influence some of the activity that I have, and that's a really good place to get sort of like tips and advice as well on what other people are doing. So I guess from that side it would just be the podcast and YouTube that I stick to mainly.
Right. Okay. And if because I'm thinking, trying to give advice to people as best I can. If someone's trying to get into the industry for the first time, just say they're on an apprenticeship, or they're a school leaver, or they've left university, what kind of advice would you give people?
I would say start out by offering to run ads for people for free. or for a very small amount, just so you can get the experience doing it. Because I think all the courses in the world are great, but unless you actually get practical experience, you're just never gonna actually be able to materialize or actually understand how the platforms function or work. It's kind of like driving a car, isn't it? And like when you learning to do your test, you do driving lessons to learn how to pass your test, but you don't really learn to drive until you actually finished or completed it. So I think it's the same way with sort of like running ads.
Good. And just last question from me, Dom. If you were to go back and give yourself some advice, when your 20-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself looking back now?
Probably, I was going to say drop out of uni, but I don't think dropping out of uni would have helped anything. But I think maybe start what I was doing now earlier, because I think I could always see myself doing this and not doing something in geology. But I think I was maybe perhaps romanticizing the idea about being a geologist a bit too much, and whereas I could have started sort of spending more time in exploring this, which might have maybe helped me progress further than where I am now already.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dom, for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. If anyone wants to get in touch with you or find you online, what's the best way of contacting you?
My email is dom@thelight.agency, or my Instagram is just domvc.
Perfect. And I'll put that in the show notes as well if anyone's listening.
Great. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Thanks, Dom. Appreciate it, mate.
Cheers, Paul.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm your host, Paul Casey. If you'd like to connect with me, find me on LinkedIn or on Instagram, the username Casey Digital, or just search for Paul Casey anywhere you find me. Thank you.